There are few moments in gaming more iconic than the end of Red Dead Redemption, where John is betrayed by the government he's been working for, and the character we've been playing the entire game is gunned down in broad daylight. There's a number of reasons it's stuck in people's memories for so long. The onslaught of gunfire followed by silence, the stark longshot lingering on John's slow collapse, the fact that it's rare to outright kill a protagonist in a game that doesn't just stop once the credits roll. But for me, the main reason this ending works so well is that control the game places in your hands as John strides out of the barn. It's the briefest few seconds you could imagine, but it also feels like an eternity lurching along. This is your chance to fight, but you know you're only prolonging the inevitable here. And it's only around 15 people as well, which is odd. It's nothing in typical video game terms, especially from a developer whose games have often been considered the epitome of violent rampage. Trevor, for instance, could handle this in his sleep. In most other games, you could take this. But you've been trained throughout Redemption to realise that even with your psychic slow-mo sniper powers and cover at your disposal, you can't quite endure the punishment of your typical video game hero. A relatively small flurry of bullets from one or two enemies catching you off guard, even in cover, can spell the end of a fight. So you know that stepping into the open with 15 of them standing right in front of you is never going to end well. And I can think of a few times games have cut away from the action or betrayed my ability as a player to get out of a sticky situation, where there's no real gameplay reason for a character to feel tired or sacrifice themselves outside of the story dictating it through cutscenes. Red Dead, on the other hand, doesn't need to pull the wool over your eyes. Through everything the game has taught you about John's fragility in combat that you control, you share his dread as he stares through the crack in the door, but at the very least, you're going to be the one to make those treacherous bastards work for their ill-gotten trophy. Killing off a protagonist isn't anything new, but thanks to its believable framing as a gameplay set-piece consistent with how you've played up to that point, it's rarely this poignant, this engaging. Of course, the poignancy of this moment isn't purely down to the few seconds of control you're afforded in one small segment at the end of the game, but it is a result of a long build-up of other such moments in which the writers and developers use your interactions to convey the game's larger themes. For example, the minutes at a time you spend riding through the relatively empty desert acts more as a means of atmospheric storytelling than showcasing a world that's yours for the taking, allowing you to truly soak in the arid, decaying nature of what Dutch and his gang are desperately grasping onto. Everyone will tell you different things about what needs destroying in this world and what needs put in its stead, but the reality of this bluster is all around you, conveyed without words and through experience. Simply by venturing through the world, you're experiencing the decline of the Old West and the rot inherent to the so-called civilization replacing it. More importantly, however, I believe the game utilises the notion of player agency in its mission design to tell a story about the consequences of blindly following orders, and offers a surprisingly nuanced take on the cyclical, meaningless nature of violence and revenge as a result. You see, John, despite wanting to leave his outlaw life behind and be a better person, is still a remorseless killer. He'll kill for whoever's asking, regardless of what they stand for or what implications it might have on the lives of those left behind. He kills for rebels who, despite their idealism, envisioned their revolution paved with the blood of child soldiers and rely on figureheads less concerned with achieving change than achieving orgasm. He kills indigenous people for racist, drug-addled maniacs who claim moral superiority in their quest for civilization while flat out calling themselves the bad guys. John kills at cross purposes, and in the face of serious moral reasoning, will joke about why he's going with the bad guy instead. At multiple points he states his lack of any kind of affiliation, that he's simply doing what he's doing because he's told to. In every case, no matter how terrible the person at the end of John's gun is, their response remains the same: at least I stand for something. And what's crucial is that whoever's at the business end of John's gun, you as a player are at the other. Like John, you have no inherent side in this. You may have just thought, well, GTA with cowboys sounds fun, followed a dotted line to the objective marker and shot the people there without question. And even if you did start to question it once you realised the strangeness of John's situation, it's not like you had a choice in the matter. This is a game about the ruthless, lawless nature of the Wild West, where you can get a game over screen for breaking the law. Of course, whatever you're doing, you're almost always breaking the law in some form or another, but you just weren't breaking the law in the right way for the people holding your family hostage. John might say he has no affiliation, but he, and by extension you, are always doing something for somebody. You're always furthering an agenda of some kind. Your character has everything to lose, and you want to see the story play out, so you toe the line, mechanically speaking, even if you grow to feel you're on the wrong side. And at the game's conclusion, as you step out of those doors, you're forced to confront the culmination of your actions, or perhaps your character's inaction in doing the right thing. What if, on some level, the bad guys were right? What if there really are families of the fallen out there celebrating John's death even as we mourn him? Did we do any good here, or did we merely commit heinous crimes for different people than we did before? As the hail of gunfire rains down upon our protagonist, you perhaps realise that the game has been telling you this all along. Even when the people you've been helping finally get the civilization they've had you killing for, there's always going to be another monster. The violence will never stop. And in the game's epilogue, this message became, depressingly, fully realised to me. During the last act, and despite your best intentions, you perhaps unwittingly managed to steer your son away from a life of education and peace in his attempts to impress you, to keep you around. And after John's death, you see the toll these actions have taken. As Jack, you accept a random side quest and follow the markers as you always have done to achieve your remarkably unceremonious revenge by shooting Edgar Ross into a river under a dreary sky. Credits roll, the game just continues. And it's hard not to think that a better ending might have been to just stop. To let Jack live a better life and let an old fool with all of his crooked ideals fade into oblivion. At least Jack might have learned something then. Now, the game obviously isn't as hard-hitting an examination of player culpability as something like Spec Ops: The Line, for instance, but when revisiting Redemption, it was hard for me not to envision writer Walt Williams' assertion that an unofficial ending of that game is to simply put down the controller and stop playing. And it's interesting to see a game toy with its players in this way a couple of years before Yeager's storytelling masterpiece. Itself a shooter with less than stellar mechanics, but one which uses that framework to convey a message greater than the sum of its parts. Likewise, Redemption might not have the most vibrant open world or the most over-the-top gameplay or mission design that effectively reacts to your choices, but the story it tells, even with these limited considerations in mind, and despite the obvious caveat that none of it is worth sacrificing the well-being of the people realising it, easily elevates the game to the peak of Rockstar's oeuvre. So I hope you enjoyed my piece on Red Dead Redemption. This show is made possible with the help of my wonderful patrons, and I cannot thank each and every one of you enough for your continued support. If you feel like you can, maybe go and check it out. Every pledge really helps the show keep going. Thank you so much. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Rob, Nico Bleackley, Michael Wolf, Artyom Vitsyuk, Timothy Jones, Laserpferd, Spike Jones, The Nameless Guy, Chris Wright, Dr. Motorcycle, Ham Megas, Travis Bennett, Zach Casserly, Samuel Pickens, Tom Nash, Shardfire, Philip Lange, Anna Pimentel, Jesse Ryan, Brandon Robinson, Justin Holderness, Christian Kuhneman, Matthew Natchery, Nicholas Ross, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.